Got a lot of thoughts on that. I want to thank you, Mark, and the Center for Immigration Studies. It's just such important work that you all are doing right now. Art, your opening with all the statistics and the current state of things is alarming, and it does alarm a lot of Americans. More and more people are awakening to the severity of this issue. You know, a lot of my Democrat colleagues throw the phrase around existential threat. It's their favorite word now. You hear it on, related to everything. But this really is an existential issue, a threat for us. And because as we make the point all the time in the House Judiciary Committee, we have jurisdiction over these issues, and we have lots of debates in there, and that very fun committee sometimes. But we try to explain the reality of this. That, if you do not have border security, if you don't have a secure border, then you can't maintain your sovereignty as a nation. That's what this is about. A lot of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they want us to be all just kind of this one world community, sort of this new world order idea. All that sounds great, but it's a fantasy. I mean, we're the most successful, most powerful, most benevolent nation in the history of the world. But we will not be able to maintain that generosity that we export around the world, that we donate to so many countries, we help so many downtrodden people, we defend liberty around the world. We can't do any of that if we lose our sovereignty. That's what we have to be, our own nation. We have to maintain peace through strength, and when we show weakness, it invites aggression, and we're showing projecting a lot of weakness right now around the world. This issue brings all that in focus. And I think some of the numbers that Art was saying earlier bear repeating. I mean, you think about the fact that we've had over 1.6 million illegal encounters in fiscal year 21. It's a staggering number. And this is the southern border. The border has been opened up. I've seen it with my own two eyes. Regardless of the talking points that you hear on Capitol Hill, this is the reality of what's going on. The people that work on that border will tell you that. You hear it on interviews. You see it in drone footage. Fox News is probably the only media broadcast, a couple others that are still down there trying to illustrate to the American people what's going on. I mean, this is a major crisis. You compare what's happening at the southern border, just by way of comparison, to the numbers that are happening elsewhere. On the Canadian border, we only had 916 illegal encounters in 21. If you look at the coastal border patrol sectors of Miami, New Orleans, Puerto Rico combined, you only had a little over 2,000. So 1.6 million at the southern border. We have invited the world, all 160 plus countries, to come on in. We put the welcome mat out and said, you can have the American dream too. Who cares about the law? Don't worry about that. Come on in here. And we'll grant you asylum soon after, is the other kind of message that's being sent. And in fact, they're proposing that right now. But just a couple of these other statistics, again, bear repeating. The number of unaccompanied children, alien children, apprehended at the border this year doubled the previous annual record. Part of the reason this is such a concern and just seems frankly crazy to the American people is you also have COVID positive people coming across the border, of course. And that continues, overwhelming medical and other social services in the border towns. They're passing the virus to the Customs and Border Protection personnel. As of the end of July, more than 9,800 CBP employees tested positive for COVID-19, and 35 of them passed away. This is crazy policy. And all of it's very alarming to the American people. We know that because the recent polling is showing this. It's going to help us win back control of Congress. I'm absolutely convinced of it. But we also know this by our experience, not just the polling, but you mentioned the largest city in my congressional district is Shreveport, Louisiana. That's my hometown. It's a mid-sized southern city. In recent months, we have had continuous busloads of illegal immigrants dropped off in our town. The first made the news maybe 3 months ago. Someone got a tip, and a reporter went down there, a local CB, I think it was the ABC affiliate, and got news footage of people. At that point, on that particular busload, it was 80 Haitians just dropped off in our city. And they broadcasted on the news to the great alarm of the people in our town. Who are these people? Where are they going? We don't know anything about them. Have they been COVID tested? Well, my phones began to ring off the hook. I'm their member of Congress. I didn't know anything about it. They didn't give any previous notice to our mayor, our local law enforcement, anyone at all. So long story short, I got the appropriate ICE officials on the phone, and I said, what in the world is going on? And they said, we're so sorry. Congressman, but we don't like this either. We don't think this is a safe situation, but this is what we're ordered to do now. So get used to it, because there are going to be many more busloads of people coming. And now I get an email, gentlemen, every 3 days or so on average, of a long list. They have to report it to me. I suppose they're still telling our mayor, a Democrat mayor in Shreveport, but I get a long list of names that I cannot pronounce from countries all over the world that just, hey, heads up, they're coming to your town. There's nothing I can do about it, because we're in the minority party. And this goes on and on and on, and it seems to be intentional. They're dropping these people off in mid-sized cities all over the South and all over the country. And again, I don't know another word. It sounds simplistic. This is crazy, crazy public policy. The Department of Homeland Security's most recent estimate of the number of illegal aliens living in the U.S. is 11.4 million. And that number was from January of 2018. So we know it certainly is more than that now. I mean, we all know that. I don't know that there is an accurate count, or that there will be, because many of the people coming across that southern border have come across undetected or undeterred. With the gotaways don't count in the illegal encounter numbers, so we know the numbers are dramatically higher than what are actually being reported. And again, as Art said so well, all of this is the result of bad policy decisions. This is preventable. It's completely foreseeable. But the people in charge of the government right now are not concerned about this at all. Indeed, they want to double down. What's the Democrats' response today? I don't want to be overly partisan here, but these are just facts. They want to propose a new amnesty plan. So the big reconciliation package that they're trying to ram through the Congress, as if they have a mandate to do this, has now, they've given the overt attempt to add amnesty to that massive spending package. What does that have to do with the budget? Well, nothing really. Who cares? They're going to do it anyway. So we had about a 13-hour Judiciary Committee hearing in the House 2.5 weeks ago or so. And the entire purpose of the hearing was to graft an amnesty plan onto this massive omnibus spending package. And y'all may have seen some of the highlights because they made the news of that, or lowlights as they were, of that hearing. But we proved for all the American people and anyone who cares to pay attention to this that our colleagues have an unlimited, insatiable appetite for amnesty. In fact, we brought a few amendments that were of great note to people around the country, because as they were trying to graft in the possibility that maybe 10 or 11 or more million illegal persons would be allowed amnesty in their package, we brought amendments to see if there was any limit on their appetite at all. And so one of the amendments, for example, said, okay, we understand on our side we don't have the votes to stop this, your amnesty plan. You're the majority party. You control both houses of Congress and the White House. So if this is going to happen, it happens. But isn't there some limitation on the people that you want to grant amnesty to? What if they're a known and reported MS-13 gang member? Surely you want to exclude them from your amnesty program. Every single Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee voted down that amendment. Every Republican voted yes, of course. We brought another amendment. We said, well, okay, what about convicted sex offenders? Okay, let's say we have an illegal and we know they're a convicted sex offender in their home country. Surely you don't want to grant them amnesty. Every Democrat votes the amendment down. I brought an amendment and said, okay, there is one issue that I know unites all of us. I've heard all of you give compelling speeches about DUI, the great scourge of DUI in our country, driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. It kills thousands of Americans every year and maims hundreds of thousands in injuries and et cetera. So if there's an illegal that comes across, and we know, we have their record, they've been convicted of at least one DUI, surely that would be a limitation. Nope, everyone voted it down. So I brought a series of amendments just to test the limits. I said, what about 2 or more DUIs? That amendment's voted down. Literally, I brought my last amendment when they stopped me. What if an illegal has been convicted of 10 or more DUIs? Every Democrat on the committee voted it down. There is no limit to this. They do not care. They do not care. They want everyone to come into our country, even dangerous persons. And it's not a game, because now they're proposing the largest amnesty in history. The plan rewards illegal aliens, of course, over foreign nationals who follow our rules and wait in line to abide by the rule of law and do this legally. We embrace legal immigration. It's a big part of who we are as a nation. But we want people to follow our laws. We're a nation of laws, not of men. And this is playing with fire. Their plan will increase unemployment, of course. It will reduce wages of American workers. And And of course, it will encourage more bad behavior. We incentivize people to break our laws. Again, it's just crazy public policy. I could go on and on all morning. I won't. But let me just tell you what we've been trying to do on our side anyway. We've been working steadily and even desperately on solutions. And so, as was mentioned earlier, when I first came to Congress, I got elected in 2016. I came in as President Trump was coming in January 2017. I think the third piece of legislation I filed was with the Asylum Reform and Border Protection Act. I filed that in the 115th Congress. There was a lot of interest, as you may remember, in the 115th Congress about a comprehensive immigration reform bill. We tried to do it in a bipartisan fashion. The now famous or infamous, depending on what side you're on, Goodlatte 1 and Goodlatte 2, right? We tried to do everything all in one. We spent endless hours and meetings, Republican and Democrat, all together trying to do it, and ultimately it failed to our great chagrin. But my asylum reform measure was adopted and grafted into the Goodlatte bills, and we came close, but we were not successful. So I refiled that as a standalone bill in the 116th Congress and in the current Congress. But right now, we have no power, of course, in the minority to actually get a hearing on this at all. But we're anxious to fix this. In April, I joined with a number of my colleagues in the Finish the Wall Act. In late June, I and 24 of my House Republican colleagues went down to the border with President Trump. We went down to the Rio Grande Valley down there, where the epicenter of this problem. And the reason we brought President Trump is because you knew it would get attention, because most of the media in this country is trying to ignore the problem. And we did get attention for a bit. And what we saw there was shocking. Y'all, we went with our colleagues. We wanted to see what happened at all hours of the day. So our latest venture to the border was at 1:30 in the morning. And we watched with our own two eyes as droves of people are come across at all hours across that border. This is June 29th, the evening that we were there. And we saw the wristbands and the mud everywhere that are color-coded for the cartels to know who has paid them for that transport. We found children asleep in the tall grass. One of them we thought was a little 6-year-old. We thought was deceased because there was no movement. And they finally revived the child. She was so exhausted that she literally just passed out there. She was left there by traffickers. These are things that we saw on one trip there in one night. In the wall, of course, is just stopped there. We went right to the edge. Everybody knows where all the big holes are. And one of the other things we saw, to our great shock and chagrin, was that the materials that the American people have already paid for the completion of the wall are rusting in the elements, and they're just laid out in the hot Texas sun to decay because they were never painted, they were never constructed and completed because the executive orders of the Biden administration, where they basically unwound and did the opposite of everything the Trump administration had done to get control of this problem. And so the outrage goes on and on. That was in June. In September, I joined 43 House Republicans. We introduced a resolution expressing the sense of the House that the migrant surge in Del Rio, Texas, had to be properly addressed by the federal government. Why? Because we have an obligation to fully enforce federal immigration laws. But the Biden administration has effectively ordered the persons who are in charge of this, who have this responsibility on the border, not to do their job. And that's why you see Border Patrol agents retiring and leaving the service, and many of them so frustrated and confused because they're basically ordered now to work as processing agents instead of law enforcement agents, and it's a crisis. Just this month, I joined 89 House Republicans in a motion to discharge consideration of our Remain in Mexico Act, where we would codify that policy and require the administration to continue to enforce the migrant protection protocols. The Remain in Mexico policy is critical. And yes, we got a good court order and some action there, but we need to make that permanent because it follows common sense. And it was mentioned earlier, and I'll hush and kick it back to you all or for questions or what we do next. But I do believe that our fortunes are going to change pretty dramatically next fall. We have a midterm election. I think everyone now expects and projects that the Republicans will have a great victory and a big red wave. I think we're going to see a red tsunami, frankly. And a big part of the reason, is because the American people are outraged. They're shocked. They're deeply concerned about this problem that we have with our border and the lack of security and what looks to be, to many, a subversive kind of agenda. You cannot just open the borders and allow everybody in the world in. It doesn't work that way. This is not a sustainable trajectory. And I think people know that. And I think because of that, they're going to give us control of Congress again. And I can assure you that when we do, this will be among our top priorities. You mentioned in the last Congress I chaired the Republican Study Committee. That's the intellectual arsenal of conservatism in the House, as it's been known over its history, and that's the kind of the policy production shop for Republicans. And we worked for 2 years in the minority in the last Congress on developing a 400-page policy manual. We call it the Conservative Playbook for a Republican-led majority. Forgive me, I'm from Louisiana. Everything's either a hurricane or football metaphor. But using the football metaphor, we have plays ready to run on day one. Okay, and a big part of this is going to be our effort to reform this. Now, I have no illusions about this. I'm sure that President Biden will veto anything we send him, but it will send a very strong message. If we can't override a veto, we'll be ready to run when the next Republican president is elected 2 years later.